Pittsburgh Steelers fans, welcome to this week's episode of Steelers Touch Down Under. I'm Matty Peverell, joined as always by my co-host Marky Davison. Mark, how's it going?
Yen under. No, I'm good, mate. How are you?
Good. We're a little bit late this morning. We're a little bit. It was a bit like. Okay, I'll make a confession here, right? And this is going to shock some people. I've never seen the full Step Brothers movie, right? But you and I we were doing a bit of arguing just before, like some Step Brothers, and it was pretty funny. I think Mark's left the show in disappointment.
What are you doing?
There, he's back. That's for the YouTube side. The audio side, you wouldn't have seen that. But yeah, we were just having a funny little moment back there, and it got carried away, and then looked at the time. But thank you to everyone who's already jumped in the live chat. I think, Britsburg and David was in there pretty quickly. Kathy Forrest, as always. John, I think Daredevil's in there. So really starting to rock and rolling on this Friday evening. James Bradshaw, hello from Ohio. So, as always, you're still going to get Tony later on in this new time shift. We just come earlier. So welcome to the weekend on the East Coast. Or if you're in, like Britsburg and David, welcome to the weekend for you, my mate. Over there across the pond, or our mate, you feature with Mark on some of the outside the BTSC content. And then if you're on the audio side, we hope you're enjoying whatever part of the weekend it is, whether it's Saturday, Sunday, or even Monday if you're playing catch up. But Mark, this week we wanted to look at something a bit different, right? We wanted to give so if you've been listening to the show the last couple of weeks, you'll take that Mark and I, apart from addressing free agency, and we took a break from looking at guys that are developing, what we've been trying to do is basically give you something different that you're not going to hear anywhere else, give you a different perspective. And so in today's show, we're going to pick three positions that the Steelers, most people would be like, they don't need to draft those positions. There's positions more of need. But in fact, if they did draft players in those positions, what impact would there be, and why? What is the case for drafting them? And it's funny, Mark, I don't know about you, but when I went and actually had a look at this in wondering whether this was even interesting idea or not, there were some really glaring things that came up to me. So I'm really excited for this one. But it has been an obviously big week of NFL news. I know you covered on some of the stuff you do with Steelers Nation Australia, the signing of Gerard Avery. I haven't had a chance. I've had a really busy week. I haven't had a chance to look too much into this. What were your thoughts around the signing, though?
Oh, my video went viral, Matty. That's
love it.
Bring it back to reality. I think it's a pretty good signing, and it's going to help us talk about what we see today with the NFL draft. I looked up some highlights of him, as we always do. As soon as a player signs, you're like, who is this guy? Let's find out who he is. He's pretty. I think he's got over 5 sacks or 7 sacks or something like that over the 3 or 4 year career. He signs a 1-year deal with Pittsburgh. He's now behind TJ Watt and Highsmith. Now, of course, he needs to make the team, right? He needs to make the team, as they always do. Now, Zutska, man, I got to find out that dude's name. So Zutska, or whatever his name is, he's up there too. I think Taco Charlton is still a free agent, so we might sign him. I'm not too sure. But like you say, we might go into the draft at outside linebacker to help out Highsmith and TJ Watt. The big thing for me was I think that TJ Watt and even Highsmith, to a degree, need to have some time off the field. I think TJ Watt is more dangerous when he's playing 70%, 75% of the snaps. And depending what kind of role he plays, if it's a 3rd and 8 and we have to get off the field, then TJ will be on there. But maybe some certain drives, you don't play him on the 1st down or 2nd down, maybe in run stopping. But TJ's the kind of guy, too, where you play him all the time. So I liked it. I liked Avery just coming in for 1 year. It's a lot of people say, it's not a big signing, but the Pittsburgh Steelers don't need to do that. We haven't really been doing that with the last, this free agency, right? We're just bringing guys that need to just fit for this system. And I like it. Overall, I thought it was a good signing.
Yeah, no, definitely. And he's got a bit of depth to him as well. And in terms of, he adds that depth that you're talking about, in terms of the Steelers and with the outside linebacking unit. And so you've led perfectly into it. So let's kick it off. I mean, outside linebacker is the first of the 3 positions, that I wanted to cover off today, because you're right. I mean, TJ has played more than 85% of the snaps in the games that he's played in since his rookie year. His rookie year, he had 82%. Now, last year he had less. He had 73% of the overall season defensive snaps. But we saw that because he missed, what was it? Was it end up being 4.5 games? Yeah, it must have been 3.5 because he did miss 2. And then, there was the 2.5 or so there. So about 4 games worth of play that he missed there. And so you've led into it really well. We signed TJ to this massive contract. We've got to allow him to get off the field. You and I have been saying this all offseason. We've been saying it around Cam Hayward as well, like in terms of, you want to get the most out of their contract. You want to win a Super Bowl. They cannot play 90% of the snaps. It's just not on. And it's why defensive line is a key issue when we come to, is Tua there? Is he not? All the rest of it. And even if he is, I think you've got to get younger because, you're going to have attrition on that defensive line. But when we look at TJ Watt, the problem that his stats are going to be great, right? And when we talk about the snaps there, but when you talk about the percentage, that he has of the overall, Steelers defensive stats, we're throwing our eggs in a massive basket. If not just about spelling him. If he gets injured, we got a real problem. I mean, 22.5 of the 55 sacks that we had last year, literally half the sacks came from TJ Watt. Actually, that's a little bit under half. I lie. But it's like almost 40%. If you look at the quarterback hits, he had 39 of the 106, like 30% of the overall quarterback hits coming from TJ Watt. Tackles for a loss, 21. That's over 20% of the 94 that they had for the season. This is a dangerous game we're playing here. A really dangerous game.
He's the guy, right? TJ's the guy for our defense, and you hit the nail on the head too with we need the D line because last year we all know what the problem was up the middle, and we couldn't stop the run. Now with bringing back a Lulu, hopefully healthy, and Tua if he comes back, I hope he comes back. I'm really, I'm kind of like. I don't know what's going on with Tua today. Is he coming back or not? Sorry for the sidetrack, but can we?
No. Let's talk about it.
What's going on, mate? We need an answer.
Yeah, I appeared on Jeff's Let's Ride last Monday, and that was fantastic, and I had a lot of fun doing that. And we talked way too long, but we got rolling, which is kind of the case when you have a show with me. But I think when it comes to it, you sort of sit there and you think. They're talking more positively, but we don't really know. Like he wants to come back. It does make me think this knee injury was more serious. And then if you're dealing with a mental challenge as well, and I'm not saying he's mentally challenged. I'm just saying he's dealt with a significantly emotional situation with what happened to his brother, and we're coming up on over a year on that. I think that makes that injury a lot more complicated. There's the will to come back. To me, if he's not ready. For OTAs, or it's not like, oh yeah, he's gonna be ready in 6 weeks' time, definitely, clearly. Mm-hmm. I think you have to cut him because you got to go out there and you got to get a guy like a Akeem Hicks. You've got to spend a second-round draft pick on someone like a Travis Jones that Britzberger and David brings up, who is one of my draft crushes this year. Like, I think you've got to do that. I mean, the thing about it though that Britzberger and David says in the live chat, you talk through it, Mark.
Well, we need to play. It says here we need to play hardball with Tua by the 27th of April. Are you back or not? And if not, definitely cut him. And I find emotional stuff aside, I agree because at some point you have to be you need to give confidence in the fans and to say we're doing this, or just confidence in the team as well. I don't know. I wish him all the best to come back and be a part of this defense, but at the same time, if he's not there or if he's not ready. You don't want to play the same game we played last year that goes on forever and ever. And will we be back? Every single podcast on the BTSC network, every week we're asked that question, will he be back? And we're like, we don't know. And it's like at the time, you need an answer. You're going to play football for the Steelers or you're not going to play football for the Steelers. And let's find somebody else who can. And that was a big problem of the run game last year. No Alulu, no Tuitt. Cameron Hayward tried to do it.
But it was a problem. It was a problem too, for the O-line. We could have gone out and got a great tackle with that money and prop Ben up, right? The one thing I would say, though, with it is I don't know about the 27th of April. I would let yourself get through the draft. right? I would let yourself get through the draft before you start making those calls, or we're going to have a situation like we had with DeCastro, Vince Williams, all the rest of it. But what I would say is if I'm the Steelers right now, I would, how do I put this? I, as a fan, would like to hope that if the Steelers are going to bring him back or are thinking that he's going to come back, there's more positive information and more clear-cut evidence-based information that they have now versus what they had mid-season. If nothing has substantially changed in that time and it's only just general conversations where he's like, yeah, I think I want to come back, then I'm going to be really upset with that because that's nothing. That's like thoughts and prayers. Like thoughts and prayers don't win you a war, right? They don't. They help, but they don't do it completely. And this is the same thing. So, I don't know about the 27th. I think that's probably a little premature. But I think within the first week after the draft, that's when the rubber hits the road on this. I think it's an interesting one. And then, part of me would like to think he does the Steelers a solid and demands a trade so we get something for him. And then he goes and quits on the other team. That's pretty dog. But anyway.
Can you do that? If you do that, do you still get the
it depends. Some of the picks are, if you trade for draft picks, like Wentz has got to play like 70% of the snaps for Washington Commanders for like the Indianapolis Colts to get a certain pick and stuff like that. And that was the same thing with the Eagles getting a pick for Wentz as well with the first round. If he played a certain amount of snaps, then they got a first rounder. So it can get really technical like that. And you've got to pass the physical. So if he's not coming back to the Steelers, is it because he can't play up to the Steelers standard, or is it because he can't, pass the Steelers physical? Do you know what I mean? Like if you pass the physical, then you can pass the physical probably for most teams. But then there's guys like, your Larry Ogunjobis that are out there that, he didn't pass the physical for the Bears. I would love to see him in the Steelers. I'm a big fan of his. You've got Akeem Hicks, ex-Bears guy. Like there's guys you can bring in. I mean, I was talking about it with Jeff Benedict last week on the Sunday Q&A. You bring in, even if you've got to it, if you can get Akeem Hicks on bargain basement deal, like backloaded, voidable years, man, that defensive line, like how are you going to cover TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, Tuitt, Hayward, and Hicks? And you can move Hayward probably more into the nose, or you can move Hicks into the nose. They're that big. If you wanted to, you probably could even Tuitt, or you could spell one of those guys. But this is the thing. We've got 17 games. You've got room to spell people. And if the Steelers aren't going to spend more time on the offensive side, and we're going to get the next two players we've got are actually on the offense that the Steelers need to look at. If you're not going to soak up the clock, you need to have people and you need to have depth in your defense to be able to perform at that high level that you're going to need to make plays and to shut the other defense down and actually to score more on defense.
Yeah, and we didn't have that at all last year. No. Run game was really bad. I think it was like the 32nd or 31st. We all know that. It was just really awful to watch. But that was the injuries. And I think we talked about it a few times as well. They never addressed that situation from week 1 till week 17. And I think that's why you and I are frustrated now. It's like you need to address it right now. Figure it out now so you're not come week 6 and we're in the same situation we were in week 1 of last year.
That's it. So, in looking at the draft right now, do you and I know that, I'm probably the one that, gets all wrapped up in the draft and the mock drafts and all the rest of it. But is there any names that stand out to you from that outside linebacker perspective that or edge rusher perspective that you would be interested in the Steelers going after to support TJ and Highsmith?
Well, a lot of you guys know I'm not really a draft guy. And here's the reason why I'm not a draft guy. I figured it out last night. I was doing a bit of research for this show today, like looking at some, the players for the outside linebacker, stuff like that, right? And I started to like them. I started to really I was like, man, they're really good. That would be awesome to see him as a Steeler. And I got the personal attachment, like, wow, it would be cool to see this kind of player. Like in all the positions we're going to do today, I was like, it would be fun, right? And that's why I don't want to get too attached to these players because it is hard because then they go to somewhere else. But for the purpose of the exercise, I did choose, I think, 2 players for outside linebacker. But I based them because I know nothing, like absolutely nothing about college. And some people will call me out and say, I know nothing about the Steelers, but I don't care. All right. But I have for outside linebacker, I chose Kingsley Bay.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yep.
Because
Yep. Yep.
because his name's like a really crazy name at the end. And then I started looking at him, and the first thing I had,
I'm keen to hear your thoughts.
my first like initial, I guess, scouting, idea. The dude hits really hard. Like he's a solid defender.
Yep.
Every bit of high, and I'm only looking at the highlights. I'm not looking at the anything else, right? So everything is positive, really, right? He's super physical. He tackles like up on high, like really hard. And what I did notice as well is he goes for the ball. Like he goes for the ball pretty much every single time. A bit like how TJ Watt would do. How he would be in pursuit of a sack and have his hands ready to go for a tackle or the swat down to go for the ball. So yeah, I liked him for my first pick. And that's one reason why I kind of want to hope these next 30 days goes really fast. Because I want to talk about players who we have, because I get so once you start to find like, Kingsley and Nugbear, right? I'm like, it would be cool to see as a Steeler, and then if it is round 3 or round 4, right? And then if we don't get him, you're like, rats. But I don't know. What's your, is that a good pick? Would that be a good guy to come?
Yeah. So I like that you picked him up on him. And so, I think with all of these positions, I think most of them, unless a scenario that I suggest in a second, occurs, we're probably talking about guys in this show that are 3rd and 4th round and beyond, probably 4th round and beyond, that the Steelers go after unless they trade back and get multiple picks. But I like that you picked up on him. I was listening to a NFL Network show, so I can talk about it. It's not a rival network. Well, it is, but it's obviously the official network of the NFL. They're doing a series of podcasts in this draft season called Tapeheads, and it's very technical and what have you. I spent most last weekend listening to it. It was excellent. And he was one of those guys that's like the dark horse in the draft. It's someone that you're not hearing a lot about out of South Carolina. That, could be really do well. And the Draft Network had him as a consensus 4th round valuation. But he's someone that can play in a 4-3 and a 3-4 hybrid sort of defensive player. Fits the edge in multiple fronts. He's a bit bigger. I think he's like 265 pounds right now. So he might want to strip back a little bit of weight, but you get into an NFL weight room, you're probably going to change your, fat to muscle ratio there. I like the pick, Mark, because he's someone in round 4 that, if he's sitting there, I think so. And I think the dual that when we just talked about there with Tuitt and the other guys, like he's someone that might be able to play if they do a 4-3 formation as well, or he might be able to really support in sub packages. So I really like the pick there. He wasn't necessarily in the list that I had, but I just picked like the top 10. So I picked 10 guys that could be interesting to rattle off, and 2 guys that were super interesting for me based on current, prospect rankings. So I want to know who you had as that second player.
Well, a lot of my picks are kind of like what kind of name would look cool in a jersey, right? You got to think about that because you're repping the Steelers, and I think Enagbe looks cool in a jersey, to be honest. My second player was this guy. Could be like the Boye Mafia. You know what I'm saying? Boye Mafia.
Yes, Boye Mafia. I'm on it, mate. I love it. Yes, this is a guy I wanted to talk about. Bring him up. Yeah.
I have no idea who this guy is. But if we sign him to draft him in the 3rd round, 4th round, it's the Boye Mafia. Let's go. You know what I'm saying? Like it's already a nickname there. But what I liked about him, and I'm not too sure. Like I did write this first point, and I questioned it as I did. I was just off the cuff, right? First of all, he kind of reminded me of like Arthur Motes, but let me kind of jump into a little bit, right? He what I saw on the highlights of Boye, what was it Mafi?
It's Boye Mafe.
Yeah, Boye Mafe. Yeah. He looks like slow off the edge, right? But super powerful. I don't know if that's the way that I saw it.
But that's something as well that like out of college, you see a lot of guys get a lot of sacks and they're just fast, right? They get around them like Highsmith got around people.
Yeah.
If you've got power moves, that actually, he's very quick athletically anyway. I don't think that's an issue. So if you're seeing power on tape, I'm really supportive of that, but I'll let you keep going. I just want to say that I think power is an asset rather than I'd be a lot more confident in that than someone that just runs around them like Bud Dupree did.
Yeah. Also, another thing I picked up on, for my opinion, to me, he looked like clunky. It looked weird how or strange how he was pass rushing, but it worked. And that's how I kind of thought that Arthur Moats was doing with our Steelers too. Arthur Moats didn't really look like a pass rusher, but he kind of he did his job in certain points. It wasn't the best pass rusher, but yeah, I liked how the last point I had for Boye Mafe was his long arms too. Maybe that's why. Maybe that's
Massive.
why it put me off, right? His long arms, and he seemed to me he was slow off the ball, but it was powerful. But he always got there, had the grind to get there, and it just kind of looked. It didn't look like your traditional pass rush. It kind of looked like if he's an outside linebacker, maybe it looked like Cameron Hayward's like speed, but so much power. And it did look, very like clunky, but still he got to the quarterback in the highlights that I saw. And I was like, I like this guy. I could definitely buy his jersey.
Yeah, so he's got an 81.5-inch wingspan, and Cody brings it up, and Cody's right. I actually think he's gone in the first 35 picks, which is going to be really sad for the Steelers. So for me, it's if the Steelers trade back into the late 20s, which I think is more realistic than what some people might think. Just where some people are sitting and people that don't have a first round pick and that have early 30s picks trading back. But I think, with Boye Mafe, if for some reason he was sitting there in the second round, I'm like, yes, please. But I wouldn't hate it. If the Steelers pick 25 or later for whatever reason, I wouldn't hate the pick. I love the pick. I think he's an absolute talent. Or if he was sitting there at pick 40 and they had to trade up to get him, I wouldn't hate it. People go, that's not the need, Matt. I don't care. I agree with you, Mark. I think Boye Mafe is incredible. So the same, love that you picked Boye Mafe. I really wanted to talk about him. A couple of the other names, early in the draft, we've got to move on to the other two positions soon. But David Ajabo, obviously out of Michigan, he was tipped to be a top 15 pick. Then he got injured, and there was that whole video that came out, and no one helped him out. To me, if he
was it that bloke? That's terrible, by the way. That is awful. Shame on those people who didn't pick him up. Shame.
Sorry. Shame. But if he was sitting there as well, and you've traded back, or even at 20, and you had a really high grade on him, he's not going to play for 6 to 8 months into the season, if not, 2023. But the ability to get a guy like that on 5 years, even I talked about it with Jeffrey Benedict last week, and I talked about it on War Room. Maybe it was more War Room that I talked about it. But the idea of having someone on a 5-year deal, even if he's injured, he can still get used to the NFL process. He can still understand what it's like to do the film room. He can still sit there and regenerate and see what's happening. So I wouldn't absolutely hate the pick. Most people would, but I wouldn't, because I think you build for the long term. But then there's guys later in the draft. I don't mind Cameron Thomas out of San Diego State. He's probably in the second or third round. But there's guys in the 5th, 6th, and 7th round. I think guys like Drake Jackson out of USC. I really like him. Like you saw Kingsley pop on tape. Drake Jackson, if you go back and look at mock drafts this time last year, for this draft class, he was considered a guy that might be a first or early second round pick, and then he didn't have a great season, but he still got like a lot of bonuses or pluses for me. So Drake Jackson out of USC in the 5th or 6th. I don't mind Tyreek Smith out of Ohio State, and I'm interested in what Amari Barno out of Virginia Tech can do as well. So there are a couple of guys late there for me in terms of what they can do. But yeah, it's really interesting when you go and have a look at it, isn't it, about some of those late picks and how they stand out. And you're right, Mark, you start to fall in love with them.
Well,
yeah.
I looked at 2 players, and all the other blokes you just named, then I'm like, I have no idea. But it is fun. It's fun. It's super fun to do. But then you do, because I liked what I saw from, Marthy and Ednag Bear. Dude, I was like, bring him in. Bring them both in. Like, and as we go through the other guys, you wait. Oh, man, it's hard.
All right. Well, let's go to the next position. I don't want to tee this up. So I went back and had a look at it. Did you know that the Steelers haven't had, going back past the 2008 Super Bowl, haven't had a tandem running back where the top running back has run over 1,000 yards, and the second running back has run over, I think it's 550, 600 yards. But I think 500 yards is the benchmark. Wow. Now, the reason I'm talking about this is because you've got 17 games. You need to be able to run the football. That's going to be helpful for Trubisky, or it's going to be helpful for a rookie quarterback in the next few years. I don't think, as the Steelers, to get back to the way of old, we need to get 15 yards collectively. Now, we have had situations where Bell ran and Mendenhall ran like 1,200 yards, and then someone ran 250. But I think what you want is a minimum baseline mark of 1,000 for your top running back, and you need someone that's going to run 500 or some multiple running backs that are going to run 300, 250, 200. And the Steelers actually haven't had that going back that far. And when you compare that to some of the Super Bowl winning teams of the last 6 years, the majority of those, and I'm conscious of time, so I'm not going to go through all the stats that I pulled there, but the majority of those have actually had that, or someone that's run 900 yards and another player that's run like 650, for example. What I'm basically saying is we are putting too much on Najee's shoulders, way too much on Najee's shoulders. I don't think that Ballage and Snell are long-term answers. I think Snell behind a better O-line offers you opportunities. You and I talked about McFarlane a couple of weeks ago when we did the review of the guys going into year 3, and how he doesn't need to trip over his toes. But everyone, like this running back class, there's a couple of guys that's sort of near the top that will be taken by teams that really do need a quality number 2 or that have an aging number 1. There's guys available in free agency. But there might be a guy that's late, or there might be a guy that the Steelers think is a 3rd or 4th round pick that just drops to the 6th. And maybe you pull the trigger, maybe you trade back in like they did with Loudermilk this year, and they're definitely going to get some compensatory picks next year. So, Mark, and you and I are big on the run game. You and I both don't want to run Najee into the ground. Najee is an older player for a second-year player. He probably will be a captain. He may be a captain on this offense. But we can't let him do it all, or we're going to run him into the ground like we might, TJ and Cam. So I know you love running backs. Do you have a couple of running backs that you're able to look into?
Okay, so for this segment of the running back, I went with a different kind of formula because I've only chosen one person.
Okay. You've stuck the claim on all of them. You're gonna do a Brian Anthony Davis on Anthony Schwartz. It's Anthony Schwartz or bust.
But okay, the reason or the idea behind my theory how I chose this was based on this measurement alone: their height and their weight. Right.
Okay.
So I went with the biggest person, the tallest person that I saw out of the 20 prospects. Hassan Haskins?
Yeah, out of Michigan.
Sign him up. He's 228 pounds. He's the biggest guy out of college. I know that the young men are still putting on weight as they go into the NFL. He's 6'2". He runs like a train, full steam ahead, and he just doesn't give up. Out of all the highlights that I did see with Haskins, he had that old school running back mentality with the guys. Was it Gale Sayers was a running back, really good one back in the day, right? Like they never gave up. Or Barry Sanders, I know he's small, but they used to punch off the tacklers and get away and lift their legs and just keep churning away. Even a bit like Adrian Peterson. He reminds me like of a 10% of that. I just want to. You could go like round 5, round 6. He was like really down the depth order, but he was the biggest guy and he was in the most weight. And I was like, we need a big power back, I think, in my opinion, just to get the 4 yards, like Benny Snell promised for the last 3 years and didn't do anything. So that's my logic. It probably makes no sense, but I like him because yet again, I looked at his highlights and I was like, wow, if this guy was wearing black and gold, I'd cheer for him.
Yeah, no.
Huge.
The only thing for me is that he was injured. He's been injured through this draft process and hasn't done a 40-yard time. I don't know whether he ran. I definitely didn't run one at the combine. I don't think he ran one at his pro day either, but I might be wrong on that. I don't have a pro time in the report that I pulled up on him. But yeah, I mean, he's a 3-down player. He'll do a fair bit. He holds the longest. Do you know he holds the longest streak in college football for carries without a single fumble, with more than 440 like snaps before he fumbled? Yeah.
Didn't Najee as well, right? Or not?
Najee was it was second all time last season for no fumbling for touches, 381 touches also, in the regular season.
Isn't the other Wang Ha brother doing Michigan, right? So there's like the culture there is pretty strict. So I would say he would fit into our system like a little bit, right? Like we are a bit more, Tomlin's a player's coach, but he'd have the experience and veteran, presence, I guess, because when you're in that regime under Wang Harb's brother, is it John? What's his name? What's the other
John Harbaugh? Yeah. No. So, Jim Harbaugh. Jim.
Yeah, Jim and John, and same kind of Wang. I don't know, but I fell into it again. I was like, I want to pick the biggest guy I can because Najee, I think, can still play, 70%, 75%, and we still need like a faster, maybe a smaller guy too, like Anthony McFarlane. I'm not giving up yet on Ed Mac.
No, neither.
But maybe we need that guy who promised what Snell was going to promise. Like he really shot himself in the toes, right? He was like, "Oh, Benny Snell football. I'm going to get those hard yards," and he's just done nothing. It's just done nothing. And I'm ready to cut him. I'm ready to cut or go score me 3 touchdowns, and I'll get back on your side again. But yeah, I don't know. If you were to bring in a running back, it probably won't be this guy. But I just thought he was the biggest.
No, I like it. Yeah. I like the pick. I had a couple of guys. I don't mind Pierre Strong, but I worry about him in both pass catching and pass pro, and he's probably like 6th or 7th. I had Hassan Haskins on my list as well, but there's a couple of guys I like a little better. I like Damon Pierce out of Florida. He's someone that I think I agree with the assessment that he could be an improving pass blocker and above average for a running back in the NFL. He's sound with his ball handling. He, sinks his hips, fits his hands, absorbs pass rushes and pass blocking. That was a report I pulled up and I validated myself. I think Kyron Williams is a change of pace back, 5'9", 194 pounds. Even though he could be a 3rd down running back, I think if you were looking to replace Ant Mac, he's someone I think you definitely could look at. I really like him. He's really slippery. So that's a guy there. I don't mind James Cook out of Georgia. I just think he's going to probably go in the first 3 or 4 rounds, and I don't think that's where the Steelers should be picking a running back. Another guy, and the Steelers have spent some time down in North Carolina throughout the season, but there's another guy, Ty Chandler, who was really good at Tennessee, and then he left with all the coaching changes. He could be quite interesting as well, and he's really smooth. And I can't remember his 40 time, but I think, again, he seems to be really low on the mock drafts, which could be really good, or the draft rankings, which could be really good for the Steelers. He does fit an RPO-based balance of zone and gap runs, so that could work. Played in the ACC against, obviously, Pittsburgh and Virginia Tech and Wake Forest and all of that. But, he's probably not a number 1 running back, which is probably why, in terms of can take the lead back roles, that's why he's slipping down the boards a little bit. But I think it's an interesting consideration with him. But I like this chat. I like the passion for Hassan Haskins.
Well, he's just a massive unit, and I just started watching highlights and I fell in love. You know what I'm saying? That's why I don't do this stuff, man.
I'm sorry.
It's super fun though. It is really fun to be like, oh, will he be a Steeler? Won't he be? And that's going to be the next speculation for the next 28 days or whatever. And then when they do sign, we instantly go to their highlights and go, oh, who is this? But it's like yourself and Andrew Wilbar. You guys do a great job because you guys actually, look after the draft and go into other colleges. But I just see them in highlight tapes and go, oh, he looks cool. Or he did this. But I didn't even know about the guy's injury, right? I want to ask you a question before we go into the other position, right? Is the running back room? We're not set there, are we? Either.
I couldn't think that we are. I mean, look, there's been talk of Marlon Mack, on other BTSC shows and in the live chat. I agree. I think Marlon Mack's a good addition. I think there's some other, free agent running backs that are out there. And to me, I don't think Balaj has done a bad job, but I would probably look at, if you want to draft a young guy and then there's another guy that's sitting there in free agency, I don't know why you wouldn't do it. I know Balaj knows the system, but I just think you've got guys like Philip Lindsay out there. You've got Sony Michel out there, who I think will end up going back to the Rams. Giovanni Bernard's sitting out there. Latavius Murray's sitting out there. He's getting
today,
on. But
I think Bernard.
Who did? Did he?
Yeah, he went to the.
Oh, okay. I slept in today, but yeah.
I'd sign Lindsay.
I would sign Lindsay.
He used to be a brilliant back, and I think he had the year with Houston, but then didn't do anything or something.
Yeah.
But I'd bring him in as number 2. It'd be fantastic to see Lindsay there at number 2. I just don't think right now it's Najee and who? I don't know. I don't really. It's the same as the receiver room. We've got 2 receivers, and we don't know who the 3rd, 4th, and 5th guy's going to be yet. It's weird.
Yeah,
it's really
but that's why I think you want to shore up the running back room, because you're going to need to probably do some short running back sets. You're going to have, and this leads us very well into our next position. The next position is tight end, right? And I have a look at this. You go back to the Super Bowl teams. Last year we had Pat Freeman's lead with 497 yards, and he had quite a few touchdowns. When you actually look at Super Bowl teams over the last going back past 2016. Most of them have a tight end that's getting plus, two tight ends that are getting plus 550, 600, and often it's one that's getting, 800, 750 plus. We haven't had that for years. I think I had to go all the way back to almost Heath Miller's last year to find that, that stat in terms of what the Steelers have been able to do from that receiving core at the tight end position. Certainly 2016 was pretty close with Vance McDonald in the mix, and guys like Xavier Grimble. So for me, when I look at the Matt Canada offense, I look at the weakness in the wide receiver room right now, or the gaps that are sitting there. And then you look at tight end, and this is a draft that has real depth at tight end, unlike, a lot of others. I just think this is an interesting position. And don't get me wrong, I think Raider can block. I think Gentry's proven he deserves a shot as the second or the third, tight end. Freemuth, I love. Freemuth has the potential in the right system and with the right quarterback, and Trubisky is that sort of quarterback to be a top 5, if not better, tight end in this league, and for a long time if he can stay fit. But again, we've got to spell him. He can't do it all. And so I personally think we need someone that's another threat. I'm going to park the Connor Hayward chat out of this because Connor Hayward is, to me, fullback, H-back, tight end, and he could well be the third tight end, but I think that confuses the conversation a little bit. So when we're talking stock standard tight ends, unless you happen to pick Connor Hayward and you want to talk about him, but I'd love to know, Mark, if looking at tight ends in the draft, is there any names that you are like, yeah, I like this guy?
Well, for this segment now with the tight end, so this is the most important day, right, on the draft. The draft day is the most important day of the year. What's the other most important day of the year, Matty, in someone's life?
Their birthday.
Nah, besides that, it's the wedding. I went after Trey McBride. I thought,
I love it.
Let's go. That's all I got.
Nah. Yeah, I mean, look, Trey McBride, I mean, if the Steelers hadn't picked Freemuth, I'd been like, heck yeah, but he's probably going to go a little bit early. But I love it.
I've got to read.
Tell me.
What did it segue? I was watching him. He's the first number one. He's the number one overall prospect, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
but it's funny, the Draft Network this week did a tight end, or last week did a tight end comparison on the rankings this year versus last year, and Freemuth is like way far ahead. I think they have Freemuth at like an 83.5, and I think which is as a prospect, and I think his grade is a 79.25, which is interesting.
That's all right though, because when I started looking at McBride, I was like, imagine these two guys together. You know what I'm saying? Like, imagine these two guys on the field together. It would be quite a good combo and tandem. And he reminded me like a super fast player, strong, but he reminded me of like McDonald too, because he had the physicality as well. Yeah. And I started looking at him like he's athletic, he's fast. And then I started to think, well, just not like the player McBride would be excellent to bring in, but then what can he offer? What can happen with Muth too? Them two blokes together. And then I think someone said in the live chat, Mitchell Trubisky throwing to Muth and McBride. That's going to help the offense. And you just said it as well. We don't know who we have on receivers, so maybe we can use the tight ends and running back. And I thought that would be I would be happy for them to bring another tight end. Maybe it wouldn't make sense in the realm of like, oh, we don't need a tight end, but it might fit the system and help out the offense, having two, like, I guess, stars at tight end and see what can happen in this offense.
Well, that's it. I mean, if you look at what the Eagles did as well, when they won the Super Bowl, I pulled it up. I'm trying to pull up those stats again, because what was interesting is that like Burton and Trey Burton and Zach Ertz, like Zach Ertz had like, I think it was 700, 900 yards that season, and Trey Burton had like 400 plus. Like that's 1,300 yards. That's enough to make up, having a top wide receiver. I'm struggling to pull it up right now. I did do all that prep work. I hate when I can't pull it up. But yeah, I think when you look at it, it's like how do they move to that sort of personnel set with two tight ends and leverage that? Because you're seeing it in the NFL now. You saw what Brady did with Gronk in Tampa and what he did for years with the Patriots. You've seen how much Kelsey has been able to do things for the Chiefs in that regard. Even Usmoa with the Bengals last year, it made a massive difference to them. And actually, I have been able to pull it up. Yeah, so Zach Ertz had 824 yards, and Trey Burton, had almost 300 yards. But that's 1,100 yards as a duo there. And they used, Alshon Jeffrey and, almost there's some tight end sets there. And I think Matt Collins as well, like an H-back. So, that's just one example. I like a guy like Greg Dulcich out of UCLA. I think he's a real vertical threat. I think the blocking, though, is the question there, but he's really competitive in that regard. And I think the Steelers have shown, even with what we did with Ebron, they can actually teach people how to block and block quite well. And Dulcich scored a bunch of points in some games last year. Like he was terrific. Later in the draft, I think Jelani Woods out of Virginia. The guy's 6'7", 260 pounds. He's an absolute athlete. He's developmental though, like he was a high school quarterback, then moved a little bit to the wide receiver. I think like a guy, Matt Canada would love a guy like that, but I think he'll be picked up earlier than what the Steelers would want to spend a pick on that prospect. There's a Okonkwo out of Maryland. He's a bit of an interesting one. There, I wouldn't be surprised, given the Steelers' ties with Maryland, to see him picked really late. Charlie Kohler out of Iowa State is a guy that I like. He was really high in some rankings going into the season and throughout the college season. He seems to really have dropped off the radar, which is quite interesting. He's a really good run blocker as well. He knows how to do down and distance, that sort of thing. So I like him if you can get him in the 6. And then there's a guy that stood out to me. I hadn't really heard much of him through the process. And I haven't been able to find much evaluation. I want to go check out his tape now. I was looking at this really late last night, particularly. But there's a guy called Austin Allen, who's 6'8" and 210 pounds, so he's got room to put on, right? And you think about when Gentry came out, and he was really skinny and really tall. And this guy's out of Nebraska. Like, they play some tough football there. He's a name no one's talking about. He probably will be a UDFA. But I'm like, I want to go have a look at the guy because he's Nebraska. He's big. I wonder how they used him. And it's names like that, like Loudermilk, Gentry, that the Steelers always surprise us with,
Did you say 6'8"?
I said 6'8", yeah.
Oh my God. Sign him up. 6'8". That's huge. Is that the tallest person alive? Is that? Oh my.
I'm trying to pull up some stats for him, but I just thought he was. Yeah, he had 602 yards, 38 receptions, 2 touchdowns, average of 15.8 yards per reception.
Imagine he's like if 6'8" is where his his head ends, or his what I'm saying, like his arm, like sorry, that just blew me away.
Well, imagine the catch radius on 6'8".
He's got a 7-foot catch radius, or maybe more, 7'2", 3. Would put his hands up in the air.
He must do. Yeah. His wingspan is 7'3". 73 inches. I lie.
73 unbeatable. Put your hands up in the air and just throw that like you're at a the carny in the carnival rides, and just try and fit it into the slot, and you're sweet. You win. How do you not lose?
There we go. His wingspan, I lie. His wingspan's 81 3/4 inches. I pulled it up.
Oh my, that's amazing. I need to find this guy.
Actually, the weight that I had in Draft Network is wrong. They had him at 210 pounds. This one says he's 260, so that means he's a lot more plug and play. 34 and 1/8 inch arms.
That's amazing.
He's a guy. He's the sort of guy that you see the Steelers pick, and you're sitting there and you're like, I didn't even think of him. The other guy I think that's worth mentioning is Lucas Krull out of Pittsburgh. Now, obviously, we're really close to Pittsburgh. We have obviously we train the same facility. When I say really close, we're close to that college and what they're doing. He's a guy, that I think will be a UDFA. But if the Steelers had an extra pick in the 7th for whatever reason, or if they liked him enough late, you never know. I don't really love the fit. I wish I could sit here and confidently talk about Cole Turner out of Nevada, but he hasn't really impressed in the in that draft process through the bowl game. I think he did all right in the Senior Bowl, but he didn't do well at the combine, and I think that's really put a question mark over his head. I don't like the guys out of Alabama, Weidemeyer or whatever it is. I think he's not a good player.
Oh, he's my guy.
Oh, you had him. All right, tell me why you like him. Oh, I don't like him,
mate. He's up. He's my second guy. You know why? Because his name's cool. And then I started looking at his tape and I started to fall in love yet again, right? I thought he looked pretty good. Right? He looked pretty good in those like zone like coverages when he was going out breaking in the receiver routes. He was finding the correct, spots to sit in and look back at the quarterback. I like that. What I saw from him, he was always connecting with the quarterback, finding where if the quarterback was in trouble, he'd look back and say, "Mate, I'm open. I'm here." A lot of times, receivers and tight ends, they just run their route and don't really understand if the quarterback's under pressure. But he's coming back to the football, and what I did see in the highlights, of course, because they're all positive, I did see him always looking back for the football and having good separation and not just running the certain route you have to. But maybe like finding and being a bit more creative and trying figuring it out with the quarterback. So I liked him, to be honest.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of his tape that stands out, and people like the traits. I just and as people say, he's like having a six, tackle, a six offensive lineman and a tackle on the field. But I don't think he's going to be able to shake defenders. That was something that I saw in some assessments. And then I went and looked at the tape because I saw him in some college games, particularly like I'm a Longhorns fan. I saw them, and I watched the Texas A&M game against Bama where they won. Like, I just don't know. I don't know how well he actually transitions to the NFL, but I wouldn't hate it. But I also went into this tight end group looking at like, how are we going to get someone that's going to do a lot of the receiving? Because I think Raider and Gentry can offer that blocking style, unless you're going to get someone that's going to develop, into a really solid number two all-round guy moving forward. But I understand the pick. It's not like I would sit there and go, it's the worst pick in the world. I've got questions.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. From CW here, receivers need to come back to the ball. That's what I saw with Watermelon. Every time that I saw these highlights in the 10-minute package, he was coming back to the ball, finding the good zone in between the quarterback and the middle linebacker or safety. He was finding room, and maybe he got tackled a bit after, but he was finding and sitting down in the zone and getting the football and looking back and coming back to the football. That's what I liked about him. So, and he made some pretty big plays too. So, and our receivers don't do that. E.g. Claypool, right? They just never come back to football. And they seem to just give up on the route. Not like, back in the day where Hines Ward was everywhere. Heath Miller was everywhere, We need guys like that yet again.
But that's what I also think mobility in the pocket's important. When we talk about mobility, it's not just like we're going to have Lamar Jackson, But when I think about Mitch Trubisky in a way he can extend the pocket and extend the play, hopefully, and behind a better O-line. And you've got someone, James Daniels, that was doing that for him when he was in Chicago. I could see players running back to the ball like that. The thing that I guess I want to close out the show with this because we're at time. Today, as it stands, Marky D, if you could get a second-round draft pick and then get a new wide receiver, would you trade Chase Claypool for a second? Yeah,
I'm not a big fan of Claypool right now. Get rid of him.
Yeah.
That's my assessment. I'm just done. I'm so done. Go do your TikTok stuff. Otherwise, we need the Pittsburgh Steelers players to buy in to be a Steeler. I'm done. Unless you go out there and play really well, I'm done with you, mate. Just go be a Steeler. I'm sick of seeing this TikTok stuff, and just go out there and hammer someone. And I didn't really like how he ended the season when he was fighting with Trey Turner. I don't think you need to do that. He fought with Minka. You can't do that. Minka's a Steeler. He's a true Steeler. Claypool, I don't see you as number one, and I think you're scratching to be number two. And this will be interesting to see. We could use him as a bit of draft capital, maybe for the draft and change him, put him somewhere else. I don't think they're set on him, to be honest. You might be able to get a younger receiver who can run similar routes to what Claypool can, but the halfback carry that he normally gets. Surely, he I don't know, man. I know Steelers want him to succeed, and I do too. But I'm just not a big fan right now.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. But with that's this week's episode of Steelers Touch Down Under. I'm Matty Peverell with Marky Davison as always. Mark.
Go Steelers.